Welcome to the Made for Agriculture podcast. Today's host is Adam Jones.
All right, folks. Well, welcome to another episode of the Made for Agriculture podcast. My name is Adam Jones, and welcome again to 2025. We appreciate everybody tuning in to listen to us today. We've got a topic today that's definitely close to my heart, if you will, close to my interest, and so we're excited to get our guest from Truterra on here, and also our guest from MFA as well. So let's start off today and just go around the horn and let you guys introduce yourselves and kind of tell us a little bit about your role with Truterra, and then we'll kind of get into it after that. So Brent, you're actually on the top of my screen, so let's start there.
Great. I appreciate letting us join today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I said, I'm Brent Hall. I've been with Truterra since 2019, and I'm an account manager. So I work with retailers and growers throughout kind of the central region of the United States here. So Iowa and Missouri is my focus areas. Prior to that, I spent 24 years in ag retail. What brought me to Truterra was actually we as the co-op that I worked for, we were one of the first 15 members of back then, was called Sustain. So I had seen it from both sides of the fence, had the opportunity to come in 2019 to further work with what's now known as Truterra. So that's what the journey brought me there. And I also do use conservation practices and whatnot on my small farming operation as well.
Gotcha. Very, very cool, Brent. That last little part did not surprise for me to hear that, because a lot of people that have a passion for this do a little bit themselves, right? We all have to be a little crazy, so I like that. Appreciate your time being on here. Joel, why don't you take it next?
Yeah, hey, Joel Wipperfurth. So I lead product for Truterra, which is both technology and the science of accounting and greenhouse gas accounting that we build programs around and collect data for, and then obviously we take that information and we work with food and agriculture companies that have targets and goals in the space that they're trying to meet. And then we try to play matchmaker between them and the farmers as they have opportunities to make changes on their farm. I've been with Truterra for about 2 years, and with Land O'Lakes for 15 years. Started out as a seed and agronomy advisor in southern Minnesota. Know a lot about corn and soybean production, and in that journey, with Land O'Lakes and the crop protection seed division over the years, led business operations, crop modeling, and a lot of the sciences that we're using today to be able to generate a number. I've got some background in my days when ag technology was kind of a cool thing. I live here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm a big time operator. I've got 5 steers. And I always say the good farmers don't have to work in town, Brent. So I still work in town. I can't make a living off my 5 steers, but mostly just 4-H steers.
That's fair enough. Sounds good. Well, Joel, appreciate your time for being on here as well. So, Landry, you've probably been on the podcast before, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of what role you play in this Truterra deal?
Thanks. Landry Jones, conservation grazing specialist is my title, but was kind of brought into this to help lead the efforts of bringing Truterra to our customers and helping our local champions, our staff that are going to be the ones kind of working one-on-one with our growers, getting them enrolled and making sure they're eligible, and just kind of being a resource for them so that we can make this transition as seamless as possible and try to get folks on board with sequestering some carbon and doing good things, have soil health on their farms.
Right. Absolutely. Good. Well, I appreciate your time as well, Landry. So I guess first off, I'll kind of just pitch this to Brent or Joel, whichever one of you guys wants to take it. But just kind of overall, like what is Truterra? What are some of your goals that you kind of set out? I know you're essentially involved in the Land O'Lakes network, but kind of give us a little background on the program as a whole.
Yeah. Well, we were started as a 4th business unit of Land O'Lakes. So there's Land O'Lakes Dairy Foods, there's Winfield United Crop Protection Seed Division and Fertilizer. There's Purina Animal Nutrition, #1 animal nutrition brand in the U.S. And then this fourth division is Truterra. And, if you just follow along on consumers wanting to have a connection to their food and how that food is grown, ag has always been battling for some sort of voice to tell the story of the places that that good is happening. And it just so happens that Truterra plays a role playing matchmaker between those companies that have those goals and building either public or private relationships to move money back to farmers so that they can invest in things like the addition of cover crops, maybe reduction of tillage, maybe the improvement of a livestock management practice on their farm. And, so it's connecting that opportunity that Truterra sets out to do. So Truterra is not the sustainability strategy of Land O'Lakes. Truterra is its own company operating with large food companies that have set goals around animal welfare, animal health, set goals around carbon reductions. And what I always say is the matchmaker for the farmer is that the farmer's oftentimes is looking for an opportunity to increase organic matter, and we measure that in the form of carbon for a greenhouse gas reduction for many of these companies. But if you just set greenhouse gas reductions aside, what the food companies are really looking for is resiliency in their supply chains. They're looking for a predictable supply chain that whether it's too wet, too hot, too cold, or too dry, they can keep their manufacturing facilities full without having to reorient their, whether it be their input of, corn, whether it be their input of DDGs or soybean meal, or even, their steady supply of cattle. And so it's the resilient supply chains that we take that money from those CPGs and or consumer products good companies and help those farmers invest it. When you look at the problem that companies are trying to solve for, they look at the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions from their supply chain, and maybe 25 to 30% of that comes within their four walls, or maybe the energy they use in the manufacturing process. But 75 to 80% of those emissions actually come from the farm. They actually come from the farms that they buy the inputs from. And I say inputs as in number 2 yellow corn, soybean meal, wheat, or cotton. And so, what's great about this is farmers are the answer to the problem in a really positive way that they can help make these things happen. Now, my agronomic disclosure, I'm supposed to give legal disclosures as well, but my agronomic disclosure is, Landry, I'm 400 miles away from you. I don't think that cover crops are the right thing for every farm. I don't think that no-till and reduction of tillage is the right thing for every farm, but I do know that farmers can make it work. And I think that those local agronomic recommendations is where we partner with retailers to move those programs out to the market, and they make sure that that's the right thing for the farmer before we ever start to move any of the additional money and the incentives around.
Absolutely. It turns out, Joel, that latitude is still a real thing. And that Minnesota is different than the Southern Plains, which is different than Texas, which is, I mean, turns out, and so, let's trying to paint with a broad brush never works out too terribly well. No, I appreciate that introduction. That's good. So I guess, Joel, sounds like you've got a lot of experience in this, in this space. And I know, Brent, you said you started with Truterra in 2019. That was kind of a wild time for the carbon space. Catch us up a little bit on this. Like, how has the space changed? How has the greenhouse gas space changed, say, in the last 5 years?
I guess, from our initial program, which we were truly looking at purchasing offsets from growers and having downstream CPG companies looking to purchase that. How it's kind of evolved, now we're kind of focused around, that was kind of a broad area, just trying to gather up those assets. Now we've really focused down to the supply shed level. So we're really trying to rein it in for certain companies looking for certain sets of emission factors, looking for different things that fit inside their supply shed, really trying to narrow that focus down. So, more than that broad spectrum of, multi-states, offsets, we've really kind of went more down that path to the insetting, and Joel can speak to this a little bit as well. But seeing the transition from that broad brush to more of a regionalized, focused supply shed, it really brings some different dynamics to the retailers that fall in those supply sheds and what they can offer growers. Because at this point, this space we can refer to as a wild west, but the grower hears so many different things, and having their trusted advisors or retailers being able to be that resource to say, hey, what does this look like? That's becoming where we're starting to see momentum, and just everything changes. But as we move forward, it just seems like we're really starting to focus down onto certain regions and really narrowing that circle down and trying to bring specific things to our downstream customers.
Yeah, and for those of you that are listening, Brent keeps bringing his hands up really wide. That the definition, maybe 5 years ago was really wide and broad, and it's gotten more specific as more guidance on the accounting practices and the acceptableness of the science has come along. Keep in mind, these companies are making claims about the goals that they have towards net zero. And, the accounting methods and the guidance of how you implement those accounting methods, they're continually progressing and coming along. So when Brent's going wide hands down to narrow hands, how the space has evolved is the science and accounting methods have become tighter, as well as the expansion into, carbon is one thing, but there's also, companies looking at how water impacts, whether that's water quality or water quantity. Certainly, if you're adding a cover crop, what you're going to do is you're going to build soil tilth, you're going to build soil health. That's going to potentially keep more water holding capacity on that farm. If you build a % of organic matter, you may be able to increase your soil holding water capacity by 27,000 gallons or, a little over an acre inch. So there's certain elements there where the answer may be cover crop, but now the accounting and science methods to be able to claim both a carbon sequestration or a water quality impact is increasing. Again, the what might be, the what is always what lines up for the farmer and the CPG. The what is, these good practices that build soil health and soil tilth. The why sometimes is disconnected in an accounting world, and what rules are acceptable. But in general, the interventions or the practice changes that we're encouraging farmers to make are very similar to the practice changes that your local NRCS has been asking you to make. That helps keep soil healthy, keep living roots in the ground for more parts of the year, keep the soil on the farm. And if you're doing those things, the accounting methods that we use to help those companies reach their goals is what continues to evolve and help us get more detailed on what's acceptable for them to claim, as well as what counts for farmers to be able to be eligible.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And I think one thing that Brent mentioned there, I think that really hits home for me as far as why I think this is a good fit, or what Truterra is doing really shines some light on this, is that looking at those, trying to narrow that focus on what that end user is. I mean, for so long, and Adam could probably speak to this because he's been around it so much, but for so long, 5 years ago or so, companies were taking those credits, and they may not have an end user for them quite yet, or if they were on the West Coast. And so there wasn't really a tie to something local. And you mentioned, Joel, that these companies are kind of wanting to tell that story, that sustainability story. And in my opinion, there's no better way to do that than to institute soil health practices on farms in Missouri where that grain is grown and then sold in Missouri and stays, if not in Missouri, regionally. And that company that's buying that grain for whatever process or manufacturing in Missouri, it's all staying local. And I think that hits home for me, and I think it would for our growers as well.
Yeah, I think the key here, you look at net farm incomes down over the last couple of years. Our export markets are in a constant state of change. I want to say turmoil, but change. And the question here for that Truterra and MFA came together on is, how do we help farmers continue to invest in their farms and their families and their rural communities? And whether that be through bringing a program that focuses on a local supply shed, or focuses on a practice that allows that to generate revenue for that farm. Those are the things that we're focused on bringing back locally.
Yep, absolutely. No, that's a great point. Both of you great points, and you're exactly right, Landry. When this first came out, I mean, it was both sides, right? We were trying to produce credits that nobody, that were all over the place, and there were also folks that got tasked with trying to buy them initially, and they're like, they don't even know what the heck they were trying to buy, or from where or whatever. They were just out, got hired. Hey, I got hired to go buy this stuff, right? No idea, no connection to what was actually going on that acre. So what you guys are saying there makes a lot of sense, and I think resonates pretty well as far as getting focused down. Joel, you mentioned some of the practices. So I guess from Truterra's point of view, or kind of the modeling and the stuff that you guys are working with, tell me what practices typically qualifies somebody to be able to participate in the program.
Yeah, so if you hear me say practices or interventions, those terms are somewhat interchangeable jargon, but in general, it's eligible practices are the addition of a cover crop, the reduction of tillage, either moving through no-till or strip-till, and then nutrient optimization. I say nutrient optimization. Hey, reducing nitrogen, that's not the answer for every grower. Some of them are running pretty tight nitrogen use efficiencies. Some of them, there's probably some opportunity that if they had the right management, they could maybe trim a little bit. So we do, if a farmer is using 270 pounds of N and reduce that down to 250 pounds of N, that would actually count towards a better yield from a carbon perspective. When you think about from two ways, one of them is from the release of nitrous oxide from just the application of that nitrogen. Certainly farmers try to do lots of things to protect that from volatilizing off. They incorporate it into the soil. But sometimes, even though with best efforts, it still has an opportunity to move off. And then the second one is actually from the emissions created when they created that ton of ammonia. For every ton of anhydrous ammonia produced, you create about 1.8 tons of CO2 emissions. And so, and certainly for urea, it's higher than that, and for UAN, it's almost 3 times that. So from that standpoint, anytime we talk about nutrient optimization, that's going to be an additional practice that counts towards these practices.
Gotcha. So is there any certain crop rotation or cropping system that these only apply to? I mean, are you talking corn, soybeans, wheat, or does the scope go a little bit wider than that?
For the programs we're currently running right now, it's corn, soybeans, and wheat
Okay.
are the ones that on the current program offering. So, but there is other crops that we are exploring as we move forward. You get some programs in the southeast around cotton, things like that, but the majority of what we're working with is corn, soy, wheat.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those are market backed decisions. So Brent, how come we don't have a canola program?
We don't have a downstream customer that wants or has the need for emissions factors around canola.
Yeah. Where's my alfalfa program?
We ask these questions quite a bit, but hopefully with the livestock sector getting built out, we'll have alfalfa in our mix one of these days. But right now there's no downstream customer needing that asset off the alfalfa rotation.
Yeah. And so I'm going to use the technical term scope 3 emissions, which I talked about, that emissions that come from the supply chain at the farm gate. Scope 1 and 2 emissions, when you think about a consumer products good company, come from within that manufacturing facility and the energy that's used within there. Scope 3 is the farm emissions or the emissions created from the grain. And so those emissions go along with the crop. And so as a market-backed opportunity, if nobody is buying, emissions reductions on kernza, on, dry beans, on lentils, if those companies who are producing that don't have sustainability targets around that, or don't have supply chain resiliency targets around that, they're not going to invest in those places, and we don't build a program around those places.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. So, guys, you guys aren't the only game in town, so I'll go ahead and ask this question. There's been a lot of companies pop up, some of which still exist, some of which don't still exist in the carbon greenhouse gas space. Why Truterra? What do you guys offer that others aren't? Why would a grower sign up with you guys and not sign up with somebody else?
Yeah,
I'll take that one out the gate, Joel.
I
guess
I'll race you to
for
this
me, you're working this on a day-to-day basis and stuff. Just having the connectivity and being a business unit of a 100-plus-year-old cooperative, that in itself speaks volumes. Growers are accustomed to Land O'Lakes. We work through our retail network. We're not trying to go directly to the farm gate, and they're really trying to focus our time and our strength on our retailers, having that connectivity at the farm gate and bringing those offerings to these growers. At the end of the day, that's where I hang my hat out is, being part of a cooperative system. Growers are used to that. They have trust in that. And it just seems like we have, I guess, how I look at it, the connectivity from top to bottom, farm to fork with Land O'Lakes. We talk about that frequently. So I think that's where our credibility comes in, is that we're really focused on the grower and the ag retailer. So that's what on my day-to-day, that's what I hang my hat on. So
Sure.
Joel, I'll let you weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. We're for the farmer. Brent, you said this in a number of different ways. Just two specific examples of how we're for the farmer. We recognize that, you plant your crop year to year. So we contract year to year with you. We're not out there putting a 5-year contract in place and asking you to make a 100-year commitment to something that might not be the right thing for your farm. And then the second aspect of this is that local retailer, Landry, there's no doubt that you and your team can bring the right agronomic, economic, environmental things together. My disclaimer is, some of these practice changes are hard. If you've ever planted a cover crop and then gone out there and terminated it and you're planting into it, you get a little bit nervous. Geez, is this thing going to work? How did I change my carbon nitrogen soil ratio? Is my corn going to be a little bit yellow because of this? And then the second year, if that doesn't completely fail, you come back and get bold and you try to plant into a green. And, then you're really questioning if you've lost your sanity. And, you've got to do a gut check and, that works too. And so, having that local retailer that's there to help guide through, what sort of row cleaners are the guys that are winning here doing? What sort of soil seedbed prep practices are they doing? What sort of nutrient plans are they running? And, are they side dressing when they do it to offset some of the risk of, different mineralization rates? Those are all the things that make our approach to this unique in the market.
Yeah. And Adam, and I don't know if this is a question you were going to ask us or not, but this is exactly what Brent and Joel said there is the reason that MFA decided to get together with Truterra and offer this to our customers is exactly what they said. They're Land Lakes is the largest, if not the largest, one of the largest co-ops in the nation. They understand our values and our principles as MFA being a co-op. They're not trying to push another product. They're out there for the farmer, and they realize the relationships that MFA has with their customers and with their growers one-on-one. There's some other things, flexibility of the program, some other stuff we may get into, but I get that question asked, why did you all go with Truterra? And it's those two answers are one, if not both of the top two that I give. So.
Yeah. And the way that our programs are set up, our success is linked to the farmer success. So if the farmer doesn't have a good crop, we don't get a good yield of carbon. And so we have less inventory to be able to sell to, that downstream CPG. So we stay pretty connected to the outcomes that we're inextricably linked in success here.
Right. Absolutely. Well, that all makes a lot of sense. Most of your soil health principles are tied to plant growth. if we're impeding plant growth, we're not sequestering carbon, or we're not cycling that system like we need to be cycling it. So that all lines up perfectly. So you guys you said you do annual contracts, which is great. What about, I'm sure you get this question all the time, so I'll ask the obvious question that's been asked to every carbon person in the last decade. What about folks who may already be doing some of these practices? What's their opportunity to participate in some of this?
We had last year, we offered what we call a long-term adopter program. So growers have been doing it for some time. We're going through that modeling as we speak right now to see what those what turned out there as well. So and then we also have what we consider our near-term ones that just made the practice change. That program is running right now for our 25 season, but we totally understand and try to come up with things for our long-term adopters because they need to be rewarded for the things that they've done. And that's part of Joel's team is trying to figure out, how does that look? But we know that they played an important role doing what they do every day. And the ones that are just making the recent practice change there early on was part of the first set of programs where we recognize that we have to bring something to the table for the long-term guys. So first program rolled out. Like I said, we're just going through quantifications now, see what that type of stuff looks like. But we recognize that they are very important to our success.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
the long-term adopters, the guys that were the original OGs, the original gangsters of actually getting the reduction of tillage or the addition of a cover crop in there. I think some of them made those changes on their own dollar and are seeing the rewards and the benefits of that. A lot of questions I get sometimes is, hey, well, so-and-so's program only pays $15 for a cover crop. Cover crop might cost $45 an acre to put in and terminate, might cost upwards of $55. And, I think in all of the incentives that are out there, they're not always meant to completely offset the expense because there's some upside to the farmer. And that's what those long-term adopters experienced is, they went through their trials and tribulations and they're seeing the benefits, which is why they've stuck with it. So I think, that's one element. The other thing is getting the accounting practices of these companies. I actually think the long-term adopters will be the best farmers that those companies will want to incorporate into their supply sheds, and they'll want to claim in order to meet their sustainability goals. It's just that all of the guidance that comes from that technical accounting methods hasn't been clarified in a way that says, I really want that farmer that adopted no-till in 1994. And so the thing that has the most clarity right now from an accounting standpoint is when a farmer makes a new practice change, if that money was incentivized that change, it's easier for that company to claim that happened on their behalf. And so that's just those are the rules. You don't have to like the rules, but like from an accounting standpoint, that's why it's happening like that. So it's going to take a little bit of evolution. It's going to take a little bit more clearer guidance as to how those companies claim that these emissions are happening in their supply shed as a result of some interactions that they've had.
Absolutely. Well, you're exactly right. I mean, you guys know how this goes. Once you've made that practice change and kind of committed to that different agronomic system, the days that you infiltrate more water when it rains 3 inches, all those kind of things. I mean, that is an ecosystem service that is very underpaid and undervalued by society, right? I don't know how you ever quantify it or really get the money back to exactly the right person, but don't hate the player, hate the game. Right. I mean, it's just, but that is what it is. And when you know where some of those fields are and you start to notice those kind of things, I don't know what the ecosystem value is to actually contribute back to those folks, but it's big, right? I mean, think about, flood control and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what does it mean when your field does not run water off when everybody else's does? To society, a lot, you would think, So I mean, and that all has absolutely nothing to do with carbon space, right? It's just straight up, brick and mortar type changes. So I get it. I think folks are used to that at this point, and understand that it's kind of an evolving system, and we hope to be able to get there. So I guess or say somebody wants to participate, what data is kind of necessary? I know there's always that part of it, and or kind of proof of adoption of some practices, or maybe overlap with program dollars. We've had a very robust state cost share system. We've got, obviously, NRCS has worked really hard in Missouri for the last 25 years at this point, almost, on the cover crop side of things. So where's some of that crossover, and what data does somebody need to be able to have to participate in the program?
Yeah, on the data side of things, Adam, basically it's just the general cropping information. What crop you're planting, are you using cover crops, plant dates, harvest dates, your tillage, your fertilizer dates, the amount of fertilizer you put on, just your general cropping information on that acre. That yield is another play in that, but it's just all your general cropping information. When we've originally started out with carbon, I believe there was 114 data points that we collected. We've, through maturing and learning, I think we're down to about 37 data points total now. So we really trim out a lot of the unnecessary data collection. So it's just really down to the nitty gritty farm level of what are we doing on that acre. Talk about some of your cost shares and stuff. Your state and federal fund cost shares, you can stack that with our commercial program. So you can have public funds, and then you can tack that on top of our private funds that's fund the carbon program. So that is okay. And I actually encourage that. If there's opportunity where you can get some of those federal or state funds, it makes total sense to be able to incorporate that right in to the plan.
Yeah,
absolutely. And we're going to ask for that data back 3 years in a lot of situations.
Okay.
And so, let's talk a little bit about the best farmers that have the easiest time getting into this. It's the ones where you can show up on their farm and say, tell me what the yields were back in 2021. And they pull up a spreadsheet and they go, you know what? I keep all my fertilizer and my planting dates and all that stuff. I keep that all right here in this spreadsheet because I calculate ROI from there. Or maybe a farmer that, has a bunch of their stuff in My John Deere or in Climate or in some sort of a farm management system, and they're willing to share that with MFA in an organized fashion. That data doesn't have 100% of what you need to fill out the information, but it's got an awful lot of it. If you show up to the farm and the person is running it all off of their memory, and they're shuffling around some insurance paperwork and things like that, that's a little bit harder to get some things. But those that are really organized in having some of this records, you can make it through both of them. It's just a lot faster for farmers that are well organized in their data processes.
Yeah. Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. So Landry, I guess, tell me MFA's part in this. How do you plan on utilizing kind of the MFA team to both outreach to growers and also being able to help folks get into the program and participate?
Yeah. So we've got the way that we've kind of got this structured is we've got what we're calling our local champions, Truterra champions in each of our 10 districts. Those individuals will work one-on-one with the growers to help them through the process of getting them enrolled in the portal, Truterra's portal, getting the data that they need to collect to make them eligible, and then essentially kind of helping them walk them through the process. MFA as internally is got communication coming out to staff to let them know. We've got some external communication coming out here in the next week. I will give a plug. We do or will have here shortly, if it's not up yet, a website that staff can go to, or not staff, but folks can go to. It's kind of a landing page, and it's just MFA-Inc. /carbon. MFA-Inc.com/carbon. And that'll be an area that folks, customers can go to get on there to kind of look at some of the information about the program, learn a little bit more about it. It'll show them also who their local champion is, who that contact is, and their contact information, so they can just reach directly out to them. Or if not, and they don't want to go online, they can walk into their local retail store, MFA location, and figure out that information as well. But
Gotcha. Good. And I know a lot of our agronomists and managers and sales reps and folks like that are going to kind of probably take this program to certain customers as well as an option to be able to participate in something. I mean, we know who's doing the good things out on the landscape, because we track those acres just like we track the rest of them. So there's difference. So we know, but absolutely. Yeah. Good stuff, Landry. So guys, I know this is kind of an ever evolving space, and here's a fun question for you. I started out this conversation, Joel, with looking back 5 years. Let's look forward 5 years. What does the carbon and greenhouse space look like 5 years from now, and what does it include that it doesn't include currently?
Yeah. Well, first thing I'd say is, this current administration is going to have some changes, and I don't know what those changes mean yet. Right.
Sure.
I don't know if that means, we're operating in a voluntary market today. I don't know if less government focus on it means that more voluntary companies will come forward and put forth effort and put more demand into the market. Certainly, USDA is going through a lot of changes in what they're focused on, and so 5 years out is got to be a little bit difficult to predict in the last 30 days. But what I would say in general is a focus on resilience is a key long-term trend. A focus on soils that have the ability to handle a 3-inch rainfall and then not get rain for the next 30 days and still produce a crop. I would say the addition of focusing on livestock and how livestock is raised, how manure management happens, how grazing management happens, and how those animals are connected into being fed a healthy diet throughout their lifespan that allows them to finish faster, or maybe finish with lower liver abscesses, things like that. Those are things I think are on the horizon. So that includes water, carbon, soil resiliency is the term that farmers might understand, and then the livestock aspect coming into play in the next few years as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you guys looking at edge of field practices and those kind of things too, or where, I guess, kind of give us a status update of where that space is at?
Yeah,
I guess
go ahead, Brent.
Okay, well, from my standpoint, I guess, the edge of field practices, they're starting to become talked about a lot more in the countryside. I have some retailers that are working on and got some bioreactors in place, some saturated buffers, some wetlands. So yes, the conversation has become more prevalent, I think, especially when there's some funding available from state or federal to help with some of those practices. So they are starting to become, I wouldn't say it's not popular yet, but the conversations are really starting to ramp up about, what can we do in specific areas? And, the water quality thing is becoming a little more prevalent, with the hypoxia, in the Gulf, things like that. So they're trying to mitigate as much of it as possible. But so some of those edge of field practices are starting to gain some traction.
Yeah, and I would say certainly from a USDA perspective, those local offices are still interested in consulting on what's best for that farm. Whether those things are available commercially or not remains to be seen.
Well, I knew that was always the challenge, because when you cut it out of the field boundary, then it is not technically included in that grain production, right? But we all know that it's like, well, yeah, but you could be, and that would be a big detriment, so I don't know. It's always been like, I've been one of those things where you could always say like, I see both sides of this situation. It's like, I understand that, but also like, it's, you don't farm on an island, right? So There's a lot of other systems in these landscapes. So
Yeah. I would also
very
say,
cool.
in that 5-year horizon, it's uncertain what'll happen with biofuels at this point, but certainly that could come in and set some precedent for practices that farmers might need to implement on their farm. That one's still out there. Some conversations around the addition of cover crops, but also the ability to mix the species of cover crops in there as new practice change that continues to get talked about. Nutrient management will continue to be a conversation piece as those things, as doing what's right for the farmer is agronomically, economically, and environmentally continues to merge together. Those will all play future roles.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I guess, guys, to kind of start to slope downhill here, and I'll start with you, Landry. You gave us the website earlier, but we should be able to get this turned out, I would assume, fairly quickly. But what's your kind of official launch date, and how would someone go to get signed up, and what would they expect if they had contacted somebody to kind of inquire about getting signed up for the program?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, technically we could probably start enrolling farmers now. All of our staff are trained. We're kind of to that point now. We're on the ground and we're running. We're just got a few things, like I said, internally, communication wise, to really kind of start rolling it out to the masses. But
Sure.
I think again, the easiest way for a grower that's interested in a program into Truterra is to, if they're not going to that website, is to reach out to the local staff. Staff is going to know who that local champion is, and then they will get them in direct contact. And then it's just having that conversation, that local champion having that conversation with the grower to make sure that they meet eligibility, and that they would be a good fit for this program. And then the grower enrolls in the portal, in Truterra's portal, and kind of gets that information set up so that our staff can then start that process of importing any data and making sure that that they are eligible, again, just by all that information or by all the data that's got to be inputted there. And yeah, that's really about it. Like I said, the website or just the local MFA staff, your salesman or whoever that might be, to get them in touch with our local champions.
Yeah, and Brent and Joel, from your all's point of view, anything from your side that you would add to that on what somebody could expect kind of upon enrollment?
No, from my point of view, that's Landry's got it spot on. I mean, that's the starting process is taking that pre-enrollment survey and getting a portal account set up and working with your local champion on eligibility and making sure everything's aligned and fits the program.
Yeah. After that eligibility is determined and you've got your enrollment done, that's probably your first biggest step. The next step from there is going to come data collection, and you're going to want to that's when you want to get your records in order. Maybe look at your insurance paperwork, things like that. That's another milestone. And then the last milestone is when we move into contracting, where we would send you out an offer and a contract. And what I would say is that's when you get an offer, that's when you've got the decision to be made. Before that, you're going through the enrollment, you're getting your eligibility criteria put together. But when we make that offer, that's when your final decision is made as to whether or not you want to move forward with it.
Gotcha. Good stuff. Well, Brent, Joel, Landry, what did I not ask you? I guess, what did we not cover that you were kind of prepared for, or anything that you guys feel like you want to add into the conversation that we had on Truterra today?
I had, so I was going to throw a few questions out there that some of our listeners
Sure.
may be thinking, if they're producers or if they're growers, and if it's a good fit for them, if even if they go and look at our program sheet and see if they would be eligible. So like from a cover crop standpoint, if they're not using a USDA or a cost share program to implement that cover crop, does Truterra have a specific rate that they require to classify as a cover crop? I mean, obviously we don't want to just go out there and not make good sense, but is there kind of a hard number? Is there a number there that folks can kind of, when they're computing some of this, especially if it's dollars out of their own pocket, from an input standpoint.
Yeah, from our standpoint, I encourage and we try to follow the NRCS standards. I know there's some deviations there, but at the end of the day, I think those standards seem to be where I think as agronomically makes sense to be able to start accomplishing what you want to do, because we know if we want to make a positive experience for the grower. So I try to encourage my retailers to align with those rates. We don't have a say in you have to use this species or this species. So, but try to mirror those rates to get the best job and the best utilization of those cover crops.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder to say that those rates from the NRCS are in place because they're the things that helped soil health and soil tilth come about the best. So certainly if our program allowed you to put on, 5 pounds of ryegrass and, get a really thin stand, it would get you paid from a scope 3 standpoint, but it wouldn't help you long-term do some of the things that you might have goals around from a soil health perspective. So yeah, I like your advice, Brent.
One other question I have here, and I think this is fairly common, is that, if a grower, say they're going to do no-till beans, or they've been no-tilling beans and they want to do cover crops, rye before their beans, but they don't want to take that leap and they're still doing some tillage prior to corn. How does that look? What does that scenario look like for an enrollment in this carbon program? Is that somebody that would be eligible for their bean years, or is it they need to be strictly no-till year in and year out for all crops?
Well, I guess, Landry, it would kind of depend on the tillage piece. You got two different pieces there. If you made your practice change on tillage, and that was what your focus was, is reducing tillage, whether you no-till your beans, and then on corn year you might do a shallow field cultivate, because we do allow a single pass seedbed prep as long as it's less than 3 inches, and then you go back to your no-till in your soybeans. In that instance, you follow as long as you're in the right practice change years and all that stuff, you would be okay. Now, if you were no-tilling soybeans, your cover crop stuff, if you were just focused on the cover crop piece, say you made your tillage change prior to that and you're just now made your change on cover crops, the every other year thing would make you ineligible, because that needs to be a continuous practice through that, because that would be considered a reversal if you went every other year with your cover crop.
Okay, that's good. Well, and so that's one of the things I really like about this program from the flexibility standpoint on that, on the front side with the tillage, is that we do have growers like that are, it's obviously a little bit easier to kind of get into this ball game on the bean side, and the corn side is a little bit more difficult. So that allows those growers a little bit of flexibility there, or, if there's some, field rutting or whatever issues during harvest, that allows that they're not tied into not doing any tillage whatsoever. And that's kind of why I want to bring that up as well. So,
Landry, what do you see locally? I'm always curious. I love to travel the Midwest and understand what people are choosing. What do you see locally if a farmer's doing tillage reductions? Are they doing no-till? Are they doing strip till? Where do they get started?
Yeah, Adam, I'll let you kind of answer that. You're in that space maybe a little more heavily than I am, where I'm located geographically, but
we don't. So in Missouri, there are some strip tillers, but they're sort of few and far between. I mean, we do a lot of strip till that's just anhydrous, but as far as true actual strip till, there's not a lot. We got a lot of topography, and so we can cause a lot of kind of in-strip erosion by pulling those big strip till rigs. So a lot of times it turns into what Landry was talking about. We've got a lot of rotational no-till. Guys are very comfortable no-tilling soybeans, not near as comfortable no-tilling corn. I don't know if it's not near as comfortable or just not able to wait for the right weather conditions. If we're going to no-till corn in most of Missouri, we need to be in May, right? And so if you've got 200 acres of corn to plant, that's possible. If you've got 3,000 acres of corn to plant, that may not be possible. And so that's where some of that tillage comes in, or at least rotational tillage comes in.
What about from a cover crop perspective? Where do you see guys getting started in their first year, and how does that evolve in their second and third years?
Yeah, so I think the easy button for most folks is getting some cereal rye out in corn stalks. We're harvesting corn with plenty of growing season left to be able to either plant, drill, fly on, broadcast a lot of cereal rye, get a great stand in the fall. That comes up the next spring, and we can either terminate it early or plant green into it. Both work here just fine. So that's kind of the easy button. The magical thing that everybody kind of has their own different recipe. If you get somebody that's really kind of deep down into it, getting something established, getting some decent growth out of it, getting it terminated properly, and getting corn no-tilled into that field is a bit of a challenge. There's some folks that have some things that work, but that's where we see more, say it's more management intensive, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
So but it can be done. It can definitely be done. There's guys doing both. I do both. I've got covers before both crops in my operation. I'm not planting green with corn. I haven't figured that out. I'm not sure if I will get it figured out, but so I usually burn down. There's guys doing it though. There's guys doing it and having some success with it. So it can be done. It just takes a little more management. We've got a lot of variable soil types too. So you got to realize also in Missouri that what works in some soil types absolutely does not work in some other soil types, and those may be directly adjacent to each other. So it's not all black, deep, lush soil down here. So,
yeah. I think that's an Iowa dig, by the way, Brent.
It sure ain't like that in southern Iowa, Joel. Remember, I'm south of 80. Trust me.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed if somebody's from Illinois or Iowa, they always have to tell you that, hey, we're not from the good part. We're not from.
Yeah, that'd be right. You got that right.
Yeah, we can relate to you.
Adam and Landry, with all the livestock down there, do you see cover crop with a lot of grazing going on down there? And I can kind of talk about what that means to the impact of the carbon yields from our lands, but what do you see from a practice perspective?
We do. So we graze a lot of corn stalks just as as they are, but also there's a lot of spring grazing potential in most of our cover crop. It's tough for us to get them established early enough to get a ton of fall grazing. There's a little bit out there, but that's extremely variable depending on what our fall weather conditions are. Spring is pretty darn dependable to be able to get some grazing, especially out of those acres that are going to soybeans, before we go in there and plant. So there is some of that going on, definitely some potential to be more of it going on. But
I think our biggest hang up there is just loss of infrastructure. On a lot of these crop fields, we just don't have the fences and the ponds and the water tank. It's just physically being able to graze them. But I know this year alone, the last couple of years with the price of cattle, that's it's picked up in interest, just being able to put more pounds of beef on. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Well, certainly from Truterra's lens, whenever there's biomass being removed from the field, biomass is the thing that generates the carbon. And so that's always one of those, Brent, I'm sure you see, the impact on cover crop biomass removal from grazing or even from removing of stalks impacts what we pay farmers. And what I tell you is it may just be the right thing for you to do. It just may result in a lower yield because ultimately the thing that we're paying for is that soil sequestration of carbon.
Right. That makes sense. Yep, there definitely is some that happens. Like I said, I don't know that there's any tried and true recipe, but kind of starting simple and starting with things that kind of have been proven to work pretty ubiquitously across the landscape is kind of an easy button. That's where a lot of folks kind of get going. Like I said, the cereal rye before beans thing is something that, especially, you can get, if we get a really wet spring or something, you can get yourself hung out there, but like 9 times out of 10, it's really kind of something that most everybody can manage through. So.
Yep.
But anyway.
Well, cool. Thanks for sharing those local agronomic insights. It's always a little different as you travel across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we started, right? Latitude matters.
Yeah.
we get more heat units than you guys do, and kind of allows us to do more of those things. And I think that's also why, like I mentioned on the corn thing, we're far enough south. Most of Missouri is far enough south. If you're patient enough to wait for warmer soil conditions, we can no-till corn very successfully, very, very successfully. We do not need to strip till in order to get corn in time. We accumulate plenty of GDUs in Missouri, and so if you're willing to wait, we can no-till corn very successfully. But it's just that scale perspective, right? It all needs to be planted on the same day every year. So
yeah. The last John Deere sold their last moldboard plow in I believe it's 2023. And that last moldboard plow got shipped to a portion of my old sales geography as an agronomist. And so, southern Minnesota has a lot of ground that's been plowed historically. Interestingly enough, the same year they discontinued the moldboard plow, which was the thing the company was founded on at John Deere. They introduced a $250,000 strip till rig that you could pull behind, and we're seeing more prevalence of that as farmers move away from. Not as many people were plowing, but certainly a lot of deep ripping and trying to manage for that corn on corn and cool soils up north. Right. That's kind of that interesting local agronomic piece of, those two pieces trading off in the last 2 years.
Yep. Absolutely. No, it makes a lot of sense. And like, we'll rip some ground, but it's very soil type dependent here. As far as certain soils that will get that treatment, and a lot of others on the same farm will not. So and then very heavy rotation. We don't have a lot of corn on corn going on. Some in far northwest Missouri, but we're actually soybean heavy in a lot of parts of the state. There's a lot of guys that will run a bean corn rotation, but we're definitely rotating soybeans and corn. Generally at least 50-50. Most everybody is. So cool. Guys, I appreciate this conversation very much. Brent, Joel, appreciate you guys taking the time to jump on here with us this afternoon. Landry, you as well, appreciate your time in this project, and looking forward to working together and working with folks to get them signed up for this. So thank you guys very much for your time today. Thanks to everybody out there for listening as well, and we'll catch you next episode.
Thank you for listening to Made for Agriculture, brought to you by MFA, your whole farm solution.